The last lecture in the series of infectious diseases is West Nile virus, and I think after you are exposed to this information, you'll understand why it was included. We've again set it up, the lecture, to mimic the format of the Butera text. West Nile virus is an arboviral infection of the family of Flaviviridae, which includes the prototype yellow fever, Dengue fever, Japanese encephalitis, St. Louis encephalitis, and tick-borne encephalitis. West Nile virus causes acute febrile illness and central nervous infections, encephalitis, and aseptic meningitis. Epidemiologically, unfortunately, it's the leading cause of encephalitis in the United States. It's a true emerging infectious disease. It's rapidly spread in North America. Now it's in Central and South America. West Nile virus was first isolated in Uganda in 1937. It is associated with mosquito exposure, and you can look at those numbers. Over 9,000 cases in 2003 with 5,674 cases reported in 2012. It is maintained in a mosquito-bird cycle. Most of the cases in the United States are identified in late summer, early fall. And interestingly, children have high rates of infection but low rates of neuroinvasion. Older adults are 110 times more likely to have West Nile neuroinvasion. And there are 50,000 infections annually reported. The pathogenesis of West Nile virus, since it is a member of the Flaviviridae family of RNA viruses, it is related to other important human pathogens, as I said previously, to these viruses listed. West Nile virus is an enveloped virus with a single-stranded positive sense, an RNA genome. The life cycle of West Nile virus involves microbe transmission from non-human animals to humans by way of those types of mosquitoes. West Nile virus can infect horses, birds, dogs, and other mammals. However, wild birds are apparently the optimal host for harboring and replicating the virus. Clinical presentation. For the first 3 decades that we saw the virus, we saw fever and arthritis and a rash, but in 1990s, and little to no neuroinvasive disease, but in the 1990s, unfortunately, the virus progressed to a neuroinvasive disease. There's usually a 2 to 14-day incubation. West Nile virus causes influenza-like illness, fever, arthralgia, myalgia, rash, malaise, headache, GI symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. There's a generalized lymphadenopathy, splenomegaly, and hepatomegaly are common. Macular papular rash is present 50 to 60% of the time, and it begins on the trunk. Weakness is a predominant feature, and myelitis. Biphasic illness eventuates into an aseptic meningitis and then ensuing encephalitis. Most infections with West Nile virus are asymptomatic, but you have to be aware of that rash, arthritis, adenopathy, and splenomegaly. And you want to always assess the meninges for irritation. Disease may progress rapidly, so anticipate a need for repeated exams. If you have this in your differential, you are going to have to very closely assess that patient over and over. We have to, as providers, be aware of the West Nile neurovascular disease portion, the meningitis, encephalitis, and sometimes acute flaccid paralysis. Diagnostically, serologic testing indicates only 20% infected persons develop West Nile fever, and less than 1% develop the West Nile neurovascular disease. IgM in serum in 6 to 8 days, or in cerebral spinal fluid in 3 to 5 days. You can obtain a CBC, serum electrolytes, liver function test, amylase lipase, PRC, and CSF. and the preferred imaging test is MRI. Management, there are no specific antivirals available. Treatment is supportive. All patients should be hospitalized and have a lumbar puncture to discern bacterial meningitis that needs treatment. You may need to also manage cerebral edema. Treatment, again, really is directed through the LP, the lumbar puncture, and the MRI. It must be assessed for progression of possible encephalitis. Patients diagnosed with West Nile virus may be monitored in primary care, but with West Nile neuroinvasive disease, they have to be hospitalized. It's mandatory. So patient education and health promotion, prevention is key. You've got to teach your patients to practice mosquito control and mosquito bite reduction. Eliminate mosquito larvae breeding sites like standing water around your home. DEET 20% use is necessary, and permethane to the clothes, and the combination is has a better effect. Mosquito nets and tents need to be used. Clothing needs to be used for protection, long sleeve, long pants, and avoid really exposure dusk to dawn when there's more mosquitoes available.